He was halfway through pulling my Harley off the driveway when I caught him. The engine coughed once, then died under his shaky hands. I froze for a second, trying to believe what I was seeing. A kid in a college hoodie wearing flip-flops sitting on my bike like it was a toy. When he saw me, he jumped, nearly dropped the helmet he'd stolen from my porch. "Whoa, dude, chill," he said, pretending like it was no big deal. I stepped closer, my boots crunching on the gravel. "Get off now." He laughed, that kind of laugh that tells you he's never been told no before. "My mom said this junk's been sitting here for months. HOA rules, unregistered vehicles can't be parked in plain view." My jaw tightened. I didn't say it out loud, but I'd renewed that registration last week. I knew exactly who his mom was. Karen, the self-appointed HOA queen of our neighborhood. Before I could reply, he pulled out his phone and started recording me. "Go ahead, tough guy," he said. "Touch me. I'll call the cops." He actually dialed right there, standing beside my bike like he owned the place. I almost laughed. "You're stealing my motorcycle," I said quietly. "And you think I'm the one who's going to jail?" But he just smirked and pressed the speaker button. I could hear his mom's voice shouting from across the street before the line even connected. "Don't let him threaten you. I'm calling the HOA president right now." She was standing on her porch in her floral robe, phone in one hand, waving the other like she was commanding troops. I didn't move. I just looked at her son, still holding my keys, and said, "You really don't know who you're messing with, do you?" His face twitched, but he tried to keep cool. Then the sound of sirens echoed down the road. Karen smiled like she'd already won. "Perfect timing," she shouted. "He's about to learn what happens when you break my rules." I crossed my arms, watching the flashing lights approach, a slow grin spreading across my face. Because if she thought she was calling the cops on me, she was about to have the worst surprise of her life. The patrol car stopped right in front of my driveway, and Karen rushed toward it like she was greeting her personal bodyguards. "Officer, that man threatened my son and tried to assault him." She screamed before they'd even stepped out. Her son stood beside her, pretending to be scared, still clutching my helmet like a trophy. The younger cop looked at me first, then at the Harley, then back at Karen. "Ma'am, can you explain exactly what happened?" he asked, but she cut him off. "He's been violating HOA rules for months. That motorcycle shouldn't even be here. My son was just inspecting it when this man attacked him." I could feel the heat rising in my chest, but I stayed silent. I'd learned long ago that silence made people nervous. The older officer turned to me and said calmly, "Sir, is this your motorcycle?" I nodded. "Yes, officer. Title's in my name. Registration's current." I reached for my back pocket, but the moment I moved, Karen gasped dramatically. "He's reaching for a weapon!" she shrieked, and the younger cop instinctively stepped back, hand near his holster. Her son smirked again. He was enjoying this way too much. I froze and took a slow breath. "Not a weapon," I said, keeping my voice steady. "Just paperwork." I handed over my wallet, my registration card still warm from my pocket. The older cop looked at it, his brows lifting slightly as he read the name. "Mr. Dean Harlow?" he asked. I nodded once. "Yes, sir." He glanced at me again, this time with something like recognition. Karen didn't notice. She was too busy ranting about community standards and property values. The officer cleared his throat. "Ma'am," he said slowly, "do you realize this motorcycle is legally registered and parked on private property?" She blinked at him, thrown off by his tone. But the HOA doesn't override state law," he interrupted. "And you said your son was inspecting it? Without permission?" Her son looked at the ground now, mumbling something. Karen's face turned red, but she pushed on. "You don't understand who you're talking to. I'm the HOA chair and I can have him removed." The officer's patience cracked just a little. "Ma'am," he said, "you might want to be careful with those threats." Then he looked back at me. "You served, didn't you?" I nodded again. Karen stopped talking. "Army," I said quietly. "Retired?" The older cop gave a small knowing smile. "Thought so." He handed me my papers back, and for the first time I saw Karen's confidence falter. But she wasn't done yet. People like her never are. She leaned in, voice trembling with fury. "You think that uniform makes you untouchable?" she hissed. I met her eyes and said, "No. But it means I know exactly how to handle people who cross the line." And right then, her phone buzzed, and the look on her face told me the real trouble was only beginning. Karen's face drained of color as she looked down at her phone. Her fingers trembled slightly, though she tried to hide it behind that usual fake confidence. The officers were still there, standing between us, when she suddenly stepped back, muttering, "This can't be happening." I could see the message flash briefly on her screen before she turned it away. Security footage leaked. I tilted my head. "Something wrong?" I asked, my tone calm but sharp enough to cut through her act. She didn't answer, just whispered something to her son, who instantly looked nervous. The younger cop frowned. "Ma'am, what footage?" She didn't respond, so I spoke instead. "Maybe the footage of her son breaking into my garage last week," I said, watching her eyes widen. "Or maybe the one from 15 minutes ago where he tried to hotwire my bike." Her son's voice cracked. You recorded that?" I smiled slightly.
"Multiple angles." Karen spun toward me, her voice rising again.
"That's invasion of privacy," she snapped. "You can't record people without permission." "Actually," the older officer said before I could reply, "he can. It's his property, and those cameras were clearly marked." He pointed toward the security sign by my mailbox that she'd ignored 100 times. Karen's mouth opened and closed like she couldn't decide whether to argue or run. Her phone buzzed again. Another notification, this time louder. A neighbor was live-streaming the scene from across the street. I heard someone whisper, "That's the HOA lady, right?" followed by soft laughter. Karen's son tried to hand the helmet back, mumbling, "We should just go, Mom." But she snapped, "No. He set us up. He planned this." The older officer sighed. "Ma'am, please stop. You're making this worse for yourself." He turned to me. "Sir, do you want to press charges for attempted theft?" I didn't answer right away. I looked at her. The same woman who'd fined me for having my flagpole 2 inches too high, who'd threatened to report my daughter's dog for barking. Now she was cornered, trapped by her own arrogance. Finally I said, "Not yet." Her eyes flicked up at me, surprised. "But I will," I continued, "if either of you step one more foot on my land." The air went still. Karen stared at me, her son avoiding eye contact. Then quietly, I added, "You really should have checked who owned this property before you started your little power game." The older cop's radio crackled, and what came through next made everyone freeze. "Dispatch, we've got a call. Possible trespassing and impersonation of law enforcement under investigation at Pine Oak Circle." The officer looked straight at Karen. "That's your address, ma'am." Her face went pale as chalk. Karen's lips parted, but no words came out. The sirens in the distance were getting closer again. Different tone, sharper. Her son tugged her sleeve, whispering, "Mom, what's going on?" But she didn't answer. She just stood there, frozen, her face tightening as 2 unmarked black SUVs rolled slowly into the cul-de-sac. The older officer stepped back, clearly recognizing the vehicles. "That's county investigators," he muttered under his breath. Karen tried to recover her voice. "Wait, this is a mistake. They're here for him," she yelled, pointing at me. I didn't move. The SUV doors opened and 2 plainclothes officers stepped out, one carrying a file, the other with a body cam already recording. "Ma'am, Karen Mitchell?" one of them asked. She hesitated, eyes darting toward her house. "But what's this about?" The agent flipped open the folder. "We received a report regarding multiple false HOA citations, harassment of residents, and impersonation of enforcement officials. We just need to ask you a few questions." The way he said it, calm, professional, made her crumble even faster. "That's ridiculous," she shouted, her voice breaking. "Someone's lying to you. This man is dangerous. He threatened us." The agent didn't even look at me. "We've seen the footage, ma'am." Her head snapped toward me then. "You," she hissed. "You sent them? You think you can ruin my life?" I met her stare, steady. "You ruined your own the day you decided my property was your playground." Her son looked terrified now, stepping back from her like he wanted to disappear. "Mom, they said impersonation," he whispered. "What does that mean?" One of the officers turned to him. "Your mother filed 3 fake HOA violation notices this month under an invalid state code number. That's considered falsifying legal documents." Karen's legs wobbled. I didn't mean it was just to keep things organized." Her excuses tumbled out, messy and desperate. The older cop who'd been on my side earlier quietly said, "Ma'am, you should probably stop talking." And then came the twist she never saw coming. The lead investigator looked at me and said, "Mr. Harlow, your report matched what we've been building for weeks. We appreciate your cooperation. Karen's eyes widened, confusion flashing across her face. Your report? I nodded slowly. You think you've been harassing a random veteran, I said, but you've actually been harassing a state investigator. The silence that followed was electric. Even the younger cop's jaw dropped. Karen took one shaky step back, whispering, "You're lying." I reached into my jacket and showed the badge. Not anymore. Karen stumbled backward like the ground had just been pulled out from under her. Her son looked between us, pale and shaking, realizing this wasn't just another HOA argument anymore. The agent stayed calm, professional, while her perfect suburban kingdom started to crumble right there on the driveway. "You set me up," she said in a broken voice. "You moved here just to trap me." I let out a quiet breath. "No, Karen. I moved here because I wanted peace. You brought the war." One of the investigators handed her a document. "We have evidence you falsified HOA citations, threatened residents, and attempted to extort fines through intimidation. You've also been posing as an enforcement officer. Under state law, that's a felony." Her son's voice cracked. "Mom, you told me it was legal. You said you ran everything here." Karen tried to grab his hand. "Sweetheart, it's all lies. They're twisting things," but he pulled away. "You told me to take his bike, Mom. You said it was community property." The younger officer stepped forward, trying to de-escalate, but it was too late. The truth was spilling out faster than she could control it. She turned back to me, face trembling with anger and fear. "You don't understand what it's like," she said, tears forming. "No one listens to me in this neighborhood. I built this place. I made it safe." I looked at her, my tone calm but heavy. "You didn't make it safe, Karen. You made it yours." She opened her mouth, maybe to argue again, but her phone buzzed. Dozens of notifications. The live stream from across the street was now trending. Thousands of viewers, comments rolling fast. "Troll lady gets caught. Justice served." That's what happens when you mess with veterans. Her face turned ghost white as she realized the whole internet was watching. Her son muttered, "Mom, they're posting our address." She looked like she might collapse. The investigators exchanged glances, then one quietly said, "Ma'am, we need you to come with us. We'll discuss this at the station." As they led her toward the SUV, she looked back one last time. "You think this is over?" she said, voice trembling. "People like you always ruin everything good." I stared right back. "No, Karen. People like you ruin what's good, and people like me just make it right again." Her son stood frozen, unsure what to do. I walked up, picked up my helmet from the driveway, and said quietly, "You've still got a chance to be better than her. Don't waste it." Then I started my Harley. The engine roared back to life, drowning out the whispers, the sirens, and the chaos behind me. I didn't look back, because for the first time since moving here, I didn't need to. The sun was setting when I pulled into the diner just outside town. The Harley's rumble faded as I parked near the window, where I could still see the road leading back to that perfect little neighborhood, the one that had just imploded on itself. Inside, the air smelled like coffee and old wood, and a country song hummed low from the jukebox. I sat at the counter, still wearing the same leather jacket Karen once said lowered the neighborhood's image. The waitress, an older lady with a kind smile, poured me a cup without asking. "You look like you've had a day," she said. I gave a small grin. "Something like that." My phone buzzed again. Notifications, texts, messages from people I didn't even know. The video of Karen's meltdown had gone viral overnight. Comments filled my screen. "That guy handled it like a boss. Never mess with veterans. HOA power trip gone wrong." I wasn't proud of the fame. Honestly, I just felt tired. But there was something satisfying about knowing truth had finally won, loud and clear. Then the door opened behind me. I turned slightly, instinctively tense. Old habits from years in the field. It was the younger cop from earlier. He spotted me, nodded once, then took the seat next to me. "Didn't mean to intrude," he said, removing his cap. "Just wanted to say, good job keeping your cool back there. Most folks would have lost it," I shrugged. "You learn patience when you've had to wait out firefights in silence." He chuckled softly, then his tone dropped. "Karen's in custody. Her son's cooperating. Turns out she'd been filing fake HOA citations for years. Hundreds of them. Some neighbors even paid her cash thinking it was real." He took a sip of his coffee. "She's looking at serious time." I nodded slowly, watching the steam rise from my cup. Justice has a way of finding its timing, I said. He smiled. Yeah, well, you might have just saved a lot of people from her mess. He stood to leave, then added quietly, by the way, my dad was Army too. He would have liked the way you handled her. After he left, I sat there for a while, letting the silence settle. Outside, the streetlights flickered on one by one. For the first time in months, I didn't feel like I had to keep watching my back. But then, just as I was about to leave, another message came through. Anonymous number, no name. It read, you think Karen was bad? She wasn't the only one running this HOA. My hand froze on the phone. The chill that ran down my spine was colder than the evening air. I stared at the message until the words seemed to blur. For a second, I thought maybe it was just some internet troll feeding off the viral video, but something about it felt too deliberate. I tapped to open the text fully. Attached was a photo, grainy, taken at night, from a street camera angle I didn't recognize. It showed Karen standing beside another man in a dark suit handing him a folder. The timestamp was from 3 weeks ago. I leaned back on the stool, heartbeat slowing into that old familiar rhythm, the one I used to get before an operation. Whoever sent this knew what they were doing. I texted back, who are you? But before I could even lock the screen, the reply came through, someone who lives 2 houses down from you. Be careful who you trust. That was enough to make me leave the diner immediately. The air outside had cooled, wind carrying the faint scent of rain. I kicked the Harley into gear and headed home, headlights slicing through the dark. The neighborhood was quieter than usual when I arrived. Too quiet. No kids, no porch lights, no barking dogs. Just stillness. As I pulled into my driveway, I noticed something odd. My mailbox flag was up. I hadn't sent out mail in days. I opened it and found an envelope with no name, just a wax seal stamped with the HOA logo. Inside was a single piece of paper. You stopped one of us. Don't get comfortable. I looked around, scanning the shadows between the houses. Every window suddenly felt like an eye watching me. Across the street, a light flickered off. Another came on 2 doors down. Someone was still out there. Someone connected to her. I went inside, locked the door, and walked straight to the cabinet in the corner of my living room. Behind a stack of old service plaques was a small black box. I opened it and pulled out a flash drive, the one with all my security footage, Karen's threats, and now, this new lead. I plugged it into my laptop and started reviewing old footage frame by frame. There, 3 weeks ago. Karen wasn't alone that night when she planted that fake violation notice on my door. A man waited by her car. Same suit, same posture as the one in the photo. I zoomed in on his face, enhanced the image slightly, and froze. He wasn't just some HOA member. I knew that face. He was the developer. The man who'd sold half the neighborhood their homes, including mine. And just like that, I realized Karen was never the real problem. She was a puppet. Someone else was pulling the strings, and I had just cut the wrong one first. Rain started tapping against the windows as I stared at the frozen image on the screen. The developer, Robert Hensley. Clean cut, always smiling for local news segments about safe suburban living. The same man who shook my hand when I bought the property. The same man who gave a speech about community trust at the HOA barbecue 2 months ago. My stomach tightened. Karen wasn't running her little power game alone. She was following orders. I transferred the footage to a new drive, slipped it into my pocket, and grabbed my jacket. If this guy thought he could bury his tracks under HOA rules and friendly smiles, he was about to learn he picked the wrong veteran to manipulate. But before I could even step out, headlights flashed through my front window. A black SUV idled across the street, the same model the investigators had used earlier, but this one had no plates. I turned off the lights inside and moved quietly toward the door, peeking through the curtain. A man in a raincoat stepped out of the SUV and dropped something in my mailbox before getting back in and driving off. The engine barely made a sound as it disappeared into the night. When I checked the box, there was another envelope, this one soaked from the rain. Inside was a single sheet typed neatly, "Walk away, Harlow. You've done your part. Don't dig deeper. No signature, no address, just those words." I looked out at the street again. The perfect lawns, the painted fences, the quiet houses. All of it suddenly felt like a stage built to hide the real play. My pulse slowed. Fear wasn't something I felt often, but I'd learned to listen when it showed up. It usually meant I was close to the truth. The next morning, the county investigator called. "Harlow," he said, his tone clipped. "Karen's already lawyered up. But here's the twist, you were right. Her bank records show regular transfers from a shell company connected to the developer's firm." He paused. "We think she was paid to push people off their land." For expansion, I exhaled slowly. So it wasn't about rules. It was about property. "Exactly," he said. "And the land you live on?" "It's the last unsold section." I looked out my window at the Harley gleaming under the morning sun, at the flagpole Karen once complained about, at the soil I dug with my own hands. "Then they're not getting it," I said quietly. "Not an inch." A week later, the news broke. The developer was under federal investigation for fraud, illegal land seizures, and racketeering through fake HOA associations. Karen's name was all over the case. That night, I sat on my porch with a cup of coffee, the neighborhood finally silent for the right reasons. My daughter called from out of state and asked, "Dad, was it worth all the trouble?" I smiled, watching the stars come out over my land. "I didn't fight for this country," I said, "just to let someone tell me I can't park on my own driveway." The Harley gleamed under the porch light, free and untouchable, just like the truth.